You ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. From Vermont Public, this is Brave Little State. I'm Josh Crane.
Are you supposed to say the NPR Network, too? Or just...
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. From Vermont Public and the NPR Network, this is Brave Little State. I'm Josh Crane.
And I'm Michaela Lafrac. And Josh, I have a question for you.
Hit me.
So let me preface this by saying that I think, this is my grand theory, I think there are two kinds of people in this world, or at least in Vermont. There are those who drive their own trash to a dump or a transfer station, and there are those who have it picked up for them. So my question is, which type are you?
I've been both of these people.
Okay.
Currently, I have my trash picked up by truly some of the most wonderful people in the world. Shout out Mike and Beth Ann.
But you used to drive it in yourself?
Yeah, and then I just couldn't find the time. But I love the dump, too, in Norwich. Love Paul. Love going to the dump.
So many shout-outs.
Why are you asking me this?
Because I have been thinking about trash literally for months, thanks to this show that you produce, and thanks to a woman named Sylvia Dodge.
Sylvia, can you hear me?
She and I chatted on Zoom.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
So what do you need to know?
Sylvia submitted this episode's winning question.
You want me to do it now?
Yes, please.
My question is, New Hampshire has 6 landfills. Why does Vermont only have 1?
How does that number hit you, Josh?
1 is a very small number, and I just feel like we have a lot of trash.
Well, there is only 1, and about 80% of Vermont's trash goes there. It's a landfill in Coventry, about 20 minutes south of the Canadian border. The other 20% of our trash goes to landfills in New Hampshire or New York State.
I mean, I think for a lot of people, it's sort of out of sight, out of mind.
But not for Sylvia. She lives in Lyndon, which is about 40 minutes away from the landfill, but she drives by it pretty frequently. She goes up to Newport a lot to play golf.
Every time I go to Newport, I think that landfill is just gross. It strikes me as just being a really unfair thing that there is that one single landfill. And I played golf in Newport this summer, and not only could you see it from the golf course, but you could smell it. And I may be simplistic, but there's just something that seems really unfair about it to me. But I know I'm an adult, and I know things aren't always fair.
And there's this group of activists concerned that the landfill could pollute the nearby Lake Memphremagog, which is a drinking water source for Canadians and Vermonters. I see you drinking your water right now, Josh. Hope you're thinking about that. And after the summer 2023 flooding, the Coventry landfill failed to meet the air quality standards set by the state because all the building debris that was brought there emitted sulfur dioxide, which can cause respiratory issues like asthma. And if you drive by the landfill, you'll see a number of abandoned houses. I mean, you can imagine what happens to property values if you see a mountain of trash out your window.
Not ideal.
No. Plus, there is the truck traffic. Dump trucks drive through the hills of Coventry every single day. It can be frustrating if you live there. Northeast Kingdom legislators regularly introduce bills to rethink the state's waste system.
So how did it come to be? What planning made it come to be? Is it best practice to have a single landfill or not? I mean, I don't know. But then I also wonder what the planning is for the future. Those type of things. If I were a reporter, that's a lot to look into, though. I would be too lazy to look into all of that.
No, that's my job. That's what I'm excited to do.
Sylvia actually did work as a reporter for a couple different Vermont papers, and she wrote stories here and there about the landfill. But she's retired now, and so the baton has been passed to us.
How are you feeling about that?
I'm very excited. How are you feeling?
Good. I'm ready to learn about trash.
All right, let's get trashy.
Right after these messages.
Travel back in time with me to a world in which Vermont had more than 200 dumps. That is, an unregulated place to dump your trash rather than a carefully regulated and lined landfill. They were also different from the transfer stations of today, where trucks come and bring everything that you've dropped at the transfer station to a landfill. Dumps were the end of the line for people's garbage. You could still find evidence of these old town dumps. They usually look like little grassy hills. Todd Dutil works at the Essex transfer station right next to the former town dump.
Which is actually out in the back there, yep.
Okay. Oh,
yep.
that
big mound is the Essex landfill, yep.
Okay.
He remembers it as kind of a trash free-for-all.
They would just back right up there and just everything got thrown.
Okay.
Everything would get thrown. I mean, they buried appliances. They just buried everything out there. Probably bodies, too. Who knows?
Lots of Vermonters remember their town dumps fondly. In the 1960s, the radio station WDEV started a Saturday morning radio program called Music to Go to the Dump By. It still airs today.
Oh, Music to Go to the Dump By, the best 55 minutes in radio.
Well, yeah, okay. Yeah. Good morning, Farmer Dave.
Yes, it's good to be here.
When our question asker, Sylvia, was a kid, her family would drive their trash to the dump every Saturday. It was a tradition. Over at the Salisbury dump, staff were known there for baking cupcakes and brownies for customers at the holidays, and people would just hang around to chat with their neighbors. This culture of taking your trash to the dump has now morphed slightly into taking your trash to the transfer station, where it's picked up and likely carted to Coventry. So why did we add this extra step? Why did the local dumps close? Well, people caught on that burying trash in the ground or burning it outright was bad for the environment and for people. In 1970, the federal government established the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, and it started putting all these federal rules into place.
You mentioned a whole litany of things that led to the creation of EPA in the first place. I mean, we really had gross pollution problems in those days.
Now, this is from a video that the EPA put together about its own history.
Where we have found real, sustained success is where there are strong citizen organizations.
Strong citizen organizations willing to further an environmental mission? That's like Vermont's bread and butter. Remember, all these town dumps were unlined, so the toxic liquid that leaked out of the garbage would seep right on into the groundwater. That's what happened at Lyndon's old dump. In the 1980s, a sheep farmer who lived nearby had to euthanize his entire herd of more than 500 sheep. And when the sheep were autopsied, their internal organs were full of tumors, likely caused by the contaminated water they drank for their entire sheepy lives. By the 1980s, Vermont was like, okay, we've really got to stop it with the unlined dumps and the trash burning. Legislators started passing lots of laws about how we manage our trash, like that landfills have to be lined to prevent trash juice from leaching into the earth. Anyway, all these rules meant that the state government needed to hire people whose job it is to regulate waste disposal, grant permits, and more.
You have to be kind of weird to do waste, and I am the weirdest of the weird.
This is Josh Kelly. He's the Solid Waste Program Manager in Vermont's Agency of Natural Resources.
I'm always pulling things out of the trash and on vacation, taking pictures of compost bins and recycling things and, doing geeking out.
His kids don't really love this behavior, but it is one of the reasons he's good at his job. Josh wasn't working in state government in 1987 when the solid waste law passed, but he views that year with a certain reverence. It's like the trash world equivalent of going from BC to AD.
This is ushering in of the sanitary landfill era, where you require anyone who's going to operate a landfill to have a double liner, a cap on top of each cell, as they call it, liquid leachate collection systems, secondary.
You get the idea. Most small town dumps didn't have enough money to follow all the regulations. One by one, they started to close. The state had prepared for some of that, but they didn't know it was going to go as far as it did. Josh says the plan was actually to develop this system of regional landfills for Vermont. But
not a lot of that came to pass. A lot of money was spent, literally millions of dollars on planning. And in the end, the economies of scale to stand up a landfill, you have to be able to make it pay.
By the early 1990s, there were only about a half dozen dumps left in Vermont. The Essex dump closed in 1993. Now it's a transfer station. Todd Dutill and his buddy Dave, they work there. And they've actually managed to maintain the community vibe of the old dump days.
I think a lot of it is the social interaction and my coworkers, and it makes it a lot, you know. Of course, Dave and I have been together for 15 years now. It's pretty much he knows what I'm thinking, I know what he's thinking, so we don't even need to, we don't even have to second guess each other.
And there's a relationship that forms between Todd and me and the customers. And that's the precious thing about this job. This guy he's like a brother to me.
Yeah?
Well, we've worked well together.
Yeah, very well.
In the early 2000s, Vermont had a couple remaining town dumps, a bunch of transfer stations, and two, lined landfills, one in Moortown and another in Coventry. It was owned by this quickly expanding Rutland-based company called Casella. The Moortown landfill closed in 2013. Lots of environmental issues there. And that left us with just Coventry. I figure I should go check it out.
All right, I am bringing a bag of trash from Burlington, Vermont to the landfill in Coventry. Is it smelly, Mara?
Ew.
It's a little smelly. All right, good luck, Mom. Bye. All right, here we go. Off to the dump. This is perfect dump music. All right, so I just drove about 2 hours and I brought a bag of trash, so I'm going to toss it now.
So clearly, I don't take this journey every week. My family pays a hauler to pick up our trash. But it does end up at this very landfill, which is owned by Casella. You might see their navy blue trash bins and dumpsters around your town. The company was founded in Rutland in the mid-1970s. Now it's a publicly traded company with a market cap of around $7 billion. They haul waste and operate landfills in 10 northeastern states, and they have more than 5,000 employees. And it's still based in Rutland. Jeremy Labby is an engineer and the Coventry Landfill's general manager. He's offered to give me a tour. And we're accompanied by a PR rep, too. One of their jobs on a tour like this is to highlight all the reasons why operating a landfill is so complex.
You guys ready to go?
Let's do it. Let's go see some trash.
We're going to see a whole lot more than that.
The landfill is enormous. It's made up of hills, about 15 stories tall. When one section, or hill, reaches capacity, it gets capped off and covered in a sort of thick plastic, then soil. They only keep one section open at a time, the working face. I'm starting to smell a smell.
A little bit. But if you're right on the working face.
Yeah.
So you're right where the trash goes.
This place would be a fantasy land for a truck-obsessed toddler. There are dump trucks, loaders, and excavators rooming past each other as if controlled by an invisible, all-seeing 3-year-old.
And you can see our big compactor. He's placing the trash and he's compacting the trash right now. And you got a bulldozer here waiting for the next load to come from the tipper. You got a little bulldozer there that's working with the little local haulers. But the goal of that compactor, his whole goal is to smash the trash as much as he can.
Yeah, those wheels are amazing. They're like Bowser.
They're designed for that.
Snow is falling, and if you squint, you can kind of pretend you're on a series of bunny hills at a ski resort. But when you look closely, it's obvious. The hills are alive with trash.
Things you can see. You see all the plastic is the first thing you see, right? Plastic and everything.
Yeah.
There's a carpet pad right there, right? You can see a carpet pad. Looks like a flying saucer right there from someone.
Sled or something?
A sled of some sort, yeah.
It goes on and on and on. And as we stand there, more trucks drive up, loaded with trash. As for why all of this is happening here in Coventry and not somewhere else, I've heard a few reasons. There was already a landfill here before Casella bought it and expanded it in the 90s. Also, it's in a remote part of the state. Fewer people, more space. My tour guide, Jeremy Labby, points to another reason. The ground. Literally.
Geologically, this is a good site. The soil here has very dense glacial till. You can't put this stuff on really soft clay. You don't want to put this stuff on sand, really, really loose sand or on...
There are a bunch of buildings all around the landfill. They're filled with complex machinery that keeps this place going by cleaning leachate or creating power. By the end of the tour, I am really picking up what they're laying down. It takes a lot of capital and expertise to open and run a landfill. To make it financially worth your while, you need a lot of people or businesses or municipalities paying you to take their trash. Vermont produces about 400,000 tons of trash a year. That's about 57,000 adult African elephants worth of trash, or more than 866 Boeing 757 airplanes fully loaded with passengers. But in the grand scheme of the United States of America, 400,000 tons is not a whole heck of a lot. And there are a lot of steps and capital that go into building a landfill. Take it from a guy who's done it, John Casella, CEO of Casella Waste Systems. He says to open a landfill, you need millions of dollars to get through Vermont's permitting process. Then you need to construct the landfill. He estimates that costs about $700,000 per acre. Then you have to build the leachate treatment system, and you better be sure it doesn't leak. In other words,
it doesn't make sense to have small facilities from an economic standpoint.
All this means there aren't really other companies clamoring to open another landfill here. But couldn't the state use taxpayer dollars to open one?
They could, but the cost to provide that service to all of the residents of Vermont would be significantly higher because there is economies of scale in a larger facility. When you think about Vermont,
in short, John Casella is making the capitalist argument that it's simply cheaper for a private company like his to run a landfill than a municipality or a state government. And while you would expect him to make the argument that benefits his business, this is also what the state figured out for itself in the 80s and 90s, when it transitioned from the town dump model to the sanitary landfill model. But Vermont lawmakers are still paying close attention, especially when it comes to one very controversial issue.
A lot of folks, including our legislature, are very uncomfortable with that.
That's after the break. To recap, our question asker Sylvia wants to know why Vermont has one landfill and New Hampshire has 6. Let's compare the total amount of trash these two frenemies produce. Vermont disposes of less than 400,000 tons of municipal solid waste a year. Remember, that's about 57,000 adult elephants worth of trash. New Hampshire disposes of 1.9 million tons. That's about 271,000 elephants. Imagine all those trash elephants. Now, this disparity kind of makes sense. New Hampshire has more than double Vermont's population. It also has less strict composting laws, so more stuff is ending up in the trash. But the big difference is that New Hampshire accepts a lot of out-of-state waste. Out of that 1.9 million tons of trash that ends up in New Hampshire landfills every year, half of it, 1 million tons, comes from other states. This is a really thorny issue for some Granite Staters. They feel like they've become the region's dumping ground. You know Josh Kelly, our Vermont state waste management guy and self-described weirdest of the weird? Here's his New Hampshire counterpart, Mike Wimsatt. He is the Waste Management Division Director at New Hampshire's Department of Environmental Services.
A lot of folks, including our legislature, are very uncomfortable with that. They don't like the idea that the state is accepting waste from out of state, and they see it as those states aren't taking care of their own waste. They're sending it to us.
Vermont does this too, but at a much, much smaller scale. The Coventry landfill accepts what are called special wastes from a couple nearby states, things like wastewater treatment sludge, asbestos, and ash. But it doesn't take any regular household waste from other states. One reason is how far north Coventry is. There's no rail line there. If you're Rhode Island, for instance, it's going to be cheaper to ship your trash by rail to Ohio or truck it to southern New Hampshire. But say a state did want to send their trash to Coventry. Massachusetts has actually inquired about this a few times. Vermont can't outright bar a company from accepting waste from another state. That would violate the Interstate Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution, which actually came up surprisingly often in my interviews. Lots of constitutional scholars in the world of trash. But there are some levers that legislators can pull. Vermont has really strict rules about how waste needs to be sorted, for example. And Massachusetts is like, no, we can't follow that. The out-of-state waste battle is raging in New Hampshire right now. Casella is currently trying to build a new landfill in the town of Dalton, but many people, even the new governor, Kelly Ayotte, are against it. She even brought it up in her inaugural address.
We will not allow that beautiful part of our state and that beautiful area to become a dumping ground for out-of-state trash. It's just not going to happen.
As we often say in the news business, we'll have to wait and see. We've done past, we've done present, and now it's to the future. There comes a time, kids, when every landfill reaches its capacity. You can only pile trash so high. In Coventry's case, that time is coming pretty soon, 20 years to be exact. Then what? Is that when we'll get another landfill? I asked John Casella.
What do you think the chances are that Vermont will see another landfill established in the next 20 years? How likely is that?
I think it's very likely. I don't think there's any question about that, at least at this point.
The next question is, where will it be? No town wants to be the next Coventry. John said his company has identified a couple places that could work, but he's not naming names right now. There are other options, like expanding Coventry. Or we could start shipping more of our trash out of state. Hi, New Hampshire. Or we could burn it. Josh Kelly with the Vermont government says that's what a lot of southern New England states do.
They actually have, in southern New England, have embraced waste to energy much more so than northern New England. Waste to energy being burning trash. For example, Massachusetts has 5 waste to energy facilities. Connecticut has 4.
Ultimately, it's up to the state government to decide, which means our elected officials and folks like Josh.
The next question you ask is what comes next? We are intending to start a stakeholder process looking at the future of disposal capacity in Vermont.
Hearing this, I was like, oh man, that sounds like a lot of committees and studies and well-meaning people arguing back and forth for years. If you want to feel a sense of agency in the short term, and I know I sure do, here's what a bunch of trash folks I spoke to suggested. Use less crap, particularly plastic. Here's how Mike Wimsat over in New Hampshire puts it.
That's the part nobody really wants to do, right? Everybody hates landfills and everybody hates everything associated with waste management, but they're not always prepared to say, well, I'm going to do without this or that, or I'm going to make a decision about what I buy and packaging and things like that.
I talked to our question asker, Sylvia Dodge, about this.
I feel like there's a lot of people in Vermont who are really focused on reducing and reusing and recycling, and I'm curious if you would consider yourself one of those or where you fall on that spectrum.
Absolutely, for sure. I mean, I compost, and Lyndon has a great solid waste management place where I bring aluminum and tin cans and cardboard and junk mail, and so I think it's important.
Our purchasing decisions do make a difference to the people who live near the Coventry landfill. Don't take it from me, take it from Michael Marcotte. He runs a convenience store in Newport, and he lives in Coventry. He's also a state representative, a Republican. He says when the state banned single-use plastic bags about 5 years ago, he started seeing fewer of them floating out of the landfill.
I think that's hopefully been a big success. We used to see a lot of that blowing on the road. I don't see so much of it anymore. Each one of us has to do our part in reducing the amount of trash that goes into the landfill.
Let me open the door for you. You guys can stand right outside.
Back at the Coventry landfill, Jeremy Labby, the general manager, tells me that he and his employees take a fair amount of guff from environmental activists for working there. It weighs on him. But as long as we keep making mountains of trash, he sees this as necessary work.
6 months in, I said, I'm not sure how long I'm going to last in this business because I'm a people pleaser by nature, right? So being in an industry that people are always like, oh, I can't believe you do that. How dare you? It was hard, right? It's like, man, like the same people that I have to pick their trash up and deal with the crud that they leave they don't want anymore, the same people yelling at you. One of the engineers who works for the company, Tony, who I worked under for a while, she had the best quote. She says, everybody wants you to pick their trash up, but nobody wants you to put it down.
Josh, that line from Jeremy Labby has stuck with me since I first met him. I can't seem to get it out of my head.
What is it about that line?
It just felt really, really true. And it made me rethink how I deal with my family's trash. Since reporting this episode, we actually canceled the hauler that picks up our trash. And now me or my husband, we drive our trash into our local transfer station ourselves.
Okay, Michaela, this is interesting because at the beginning, you were like, there's two types of people in this world. People who get their trash picked up and people who go to the dump or the transfer station. And so you've become like a whole new person.
Are you using my words against me? Yes, I have. I've transformed. It's the power of Brave Little State.
Why did you make that shift?
Honestly, it's because of the people that I met in this episode. I think a lot about the guys working at the Essex transfer station, yucking it up with their regular customers. And I just really wanted to build more of those interactions into my day. And also being the person that takes my trash bags to the transfer station myself has helped me think more about what I'm buying, what my family's putting in the trash.
It's sort of like bringing me back to what our winning question asker Sylvia was talking about with how for so many people, trash is very out of sight, out of mind.
And it can actually be really interesting to take a very close look at your trash. We got trashy, Josh.
We did get trashy. Thank you for that.
Roll credits.
Thanks for listening to the show. And thanks to Sylvia Dodge of Lyndon for the great question. For photos from our reporting and to submit your own questions to the show, head to bravelittlestate.org. If you live in Vermont, we're especially curious to hear what questions you have about your immediate communities. Are there any local histories, enduring mysteries, or other stories playing out in your own backyards? And if you don't live in Vermont, well, thanks for listening and being a part of this community. Submit all your questions at bravelittlestate.org. This episode was reported by Michaela Lafrac. It was produced by me, Josh Crane, with additional editing from Burgess Brown and Sabine Pooks. Angela Evansy is Brave Little State's executive producer. Our intern is Catherine Morrissey. Theme music is by Ty Gibbons. Other music by Blue Dot Sessions. Special thanks to Kari Anderson, David Littlefield, Chris Bray, and Jeff Weld. Brave Little State is a production of Vermont Public and a proud member of the NPR Network. We'll be back soon with more listener-powered Vermont journalism.